Can I go to that? So good morning, everybody. Welcome to the launch of the consultation process for the European Union programming exercise. My name is Aurélie Voix, and I work at the European Union Delegation based in Pretoria. With a virtual event like this one, it's quite difficult to know who is in the room. So I would like to invite you to look at the chat. You will have a link to minty.com and you enter the code that you can also see on the screen, 7787193. And you're going to please indicate which sector you're working in, what sector the civil society organization you are represented is working in. That will really help us to know who is here. So the first thing I would like to tell you is that the event is recorded, so that you all know. And we're going to have, over the next 2 hours, a few presentations, as well as an opportunity for question and answer from our side. And we'd like you to use the chat to ask all of your questions, to tell us all of your comments, to provide all of the input. And with this now, and without further delay, I would like to welcome the Ambassador of the European Union to South Africa, Dr. Rina Kyonga, to give us the welcoming remark. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Aurélie, and good morning, everyone. Really appreciate seeing the numbers on the participants list go up and up and up. Great to see a strong turnout today, and it's a great opportunity for us to meet a wide range of civil society organizations. To our experienced partners, you know better than I do that the relationship between the EU and civil society organizations in South Africa is long and it's strong. We engage regularly, like we usually do in person in Cape Town around this time of year. In my introductory remarks this morning, I'd like to first say a few words about COVID response and the role of civil society organizations in it. Second, I'd like to turn to why you are so important to us. And thirdly, I'd like to provide a few examples of the areas in which we have worked together. So let's get started. So the reason we're meeting today in virtual format, of course, is because of COVID. The pandemic has affected all parts of the globe, and certainly South Africa has been hit very hard. Excuse me. So I want to say a few words about the EU's response to COVID and civil society's role in it here. If you follow us, the EU delegation on Twitter, and that's hashtag EUNSA, then you've seen a lot of references to hashtag Team Europe. And you might be wondering, what is this? So let me explain. To complement the government's response here to COVID-19, the EU and its 27 member states have launched a joint response to the crisis, which we're calling Team Europe, and thus the hashtag Team Europe. Civil society organizations are an integral part of EU support and of the Team Europe response to COVID. For instance, the EU is one of the main contributors to the UN-led emergency appeal for South Africa. And while we provide support partly through the UN in collaboration with the government, we lend much more support substantially through civil society, financing, for instance, risk reduction activities in universities and TVET colleges, catch-up education for learners whose schools are closed, installation of proper toilets and clean water in places where people cannot self-isolate, because we see this not only as a health issue, but a dignity issue, and addressing the needs of our most vulnerable migrant populations. So those are some examples of how we've worked together with civil society in emergency response. But if we look to the medium and long term, then I can tell you that the EU has been engaged with its partners to review and revise projects to make them more relevant in light of COVID. So we have front-loaded commitments and payments whenever and wherever possible. My colleagues will tell you more about this later this morning, but I can let you in on a secret now, that for the coming years, the explicit objective of our programming is, and I quote, to build back better. So with that, let me turn to my second point on why civil society is so important to us. At the heart of it, engaging with civil society is really all about defending democracy every day and in every way possible. And we know from painful experience that we can't take democracy for granted, even in countries where it's existed for a long time. So when we work together with civil society, we're working with ordinary people doing extraordinary things. And we learn what exactly is needed and what is wanted. Because most of the time, or a great part of the time, civil society drives societal and political change. And we've seen this certainly in our home countries. So if you think about it in neurological terms, and if you see the government and private sector on the one hand as one side of the brain and the population as the other side of the brain, then we think of civil society as the corpus callosum, the part of the brain that connects the left side and the right side and allows them to talk to each other. So our appreciation for what you do has lasted for decades already. Our current commissioner for international partnerships, Jutta Urpilainen, has lit a fire under us this year to stress even more our work with civil society. So much for why it's in our genetic makeup to work together with civil society. Let me now turn to my third point and to tell you how we collaborate with CSOs, especially here in South Africa. So on the hows, working with civil society in South Africa is not limited to supporting some specific organizations, but it's our objective is to mainstream collaboration with CSOs as an integral part of our programming. So for the EU in SA, you don't sit at the side table, but at the main table, supporting us both in program implementation, as well as in policy development and in dialogue. So let me give you a few examples. First of all, in the area of the green approach. In February of last year, February 2020, just before COVID hit, we had a very productive visit from the Vice President of the European Commission, Frans Timmermans. He visited South Africa, and in the course of that, he's in charge of the Green Deal. I should have said that. Some of you know this. He engaged during the course of the visit with some young climate activists. He really enjoyed that part of the program. So as a follow-up to that, during the Team Europe Climate Diplomacy Week in September of last year, we partnered with two CSOs, Saya and Vesa, to enable more than 85 high school learners and students across the 9 provinces to join exchanges between the EU and South African business, communities, and civil society organizations on a just and green recovery. So this was an active way of feeding in to how we're planning on this green recovery. Another example from the same area, from the green area. Through IUCN, 5 conservation NGOs so far are channeling emergency COVID support for the communities affected by the slump in wildlife related tourism, and also to provide protection against the risk of increased poaching. If we now turn to the area of small businesses, which in the EU we see small business as the backbone of the economy, we've assisted the Small Enterprise Development Agency so that it can organize roadshows for the district ecosystem model. And this particular effort involved more than 1,000 civil society actors. If we turn now to governance programming, last year we launched a program by which we will award a total of 10 million euro in grants to CSOs to support their work on accountability. The program strongly encourages partnerships not only with other CSOs, but also with Chapter 9 and 10 state institutions and the private sector. If we turn now, we've covered green, we've covered small business, we've covered accountability. If we turn to human rights, you know that the EU has a long track record of engaging with civil society. For instance, we partner with the Department of Justice and the Foundation for Human Rights, which we also helped actually give birth to at the when South Africans gave themselves birth to democracy in this country. I'm proud also to say that the European Union is a leader in gender equality, and that's because achieving equal treatment and equal opportunities for women and eradicating violence against women and girls are not only the right thing to do, but they're also a prerequisite for poverty reduction, and as such are instrumental for achieving the SDGs. And that's why we believe that gender equality and gender mainstreaming should feature prominently in our next 7-year program. So these are just a few examples from a few areas of how we work together today. But the aim of this meeting today is to explore together with you how we should work together tomorrow. Our aim, as I mentioned, was to discuss what our priorities could be for the next 7 years. And we're consulting widely. Besides with you, we're consulting with the government, the private sector, and other development partners as well. Linked to this programming exercise, we're also reviewing our roadmap for engagement with civil society. And my colleagues will tell you more about this later on. Today is only the launch of what will be an extensive consultation process. And so we look forward to continuing to engage with you as the exercise goes on. So I'll close there. Thank you for your attention. I wish you a productive meeting, and I hope that the meeting captures your imagination, captures ours as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rina, for these words and for setting the scene for us. So now I would like to ask Chad to share his screen so we can see who is in the room. I can see that there is about 220 people connected at the moment. We had about 400 registration, and I can see that people are still connecting. Also, some are struggling a little bit, so please join us. So we can see that we have a big representation of organizations working in the human rights, including women and gender-based violence, as well as education, vocational training. So that gives us a view on who is there, and thank you very much for that. This is really just to have a broad understanding to who we are talking to, because a virtual event is quite difficult. Thanks a lot. So on this, I would like to go through the agenda that we share with you this morning in the reminder in the link. So we're going to have 2 presentations. One will be on the new instrument, our programming, and one will be on the roadmap. And then the last session will be a question and answer. Please, again, ask all of your questions, your input in the chat, and please select all panelists and attendees, like that everybody can see and read. And we're busy monitoring, and we'll take these you will answer to all of your questions a little bit later. In between some of the presentation, there will be some conf break. We will have that opportunity to show you some of the work we've been doing in South Africa. So please don't disconnect if you don't see us. It's still part of the presentation. So now I would like to give the floor to the head of cooperation, Mr. Bernard Ray. So Bernard, it's your turn. Thank you very much.
Good morning to everyone, and I'm very happy to take the floor after the Ambassador of the European Union to tell you a little bit more about what's the future of the cooperation of the European Union in South Africa, and how we are willing to engage with the civil society, not only in the thinking of what we are going to do, but also possibilities for interventions and defining areas where civil society will be able to assist us in the development agenda of South Africa. I have a presentation I'm going to share with you. I hope sorry for the hiccup. I think that's fine. I hope it is fine for everybody.
Hi Bernard, can you please click on display settings there for me and it'll swap over to a different view?
Somebody has a mic. Is it okay on the display on the screen, the technical assistance? Is it fine?
Please click on display settings for me.
I click on the...
Yes, right there, please click.
Swap?
And then swap, yes.
That's
Perfect.
Correct?
Perfect, thank you Bernard.
Yeah, most welcome. Thank you so much for your assistance. So we launched this consultation process with the civil society in the framework of the programming of a new instrument, which is called the Neighbourhood Development and International Cooperation Instrument. Probably if we look at what has happened in our cooperation since 1994, the EU was, since 85, a major cooperation partner through the program for the victims of apartheid, and that involved hugely the civil society organizations in a very wide range of concepts. Of course, since the end of apartheid, cooperation with civil society has evolved, but they have remained an important player. We have continued to provide funds to the civil society, and we have supported the organization and the structuring of the civil society in the country, alongside the support we could give to government institutions. So it's an engagement which is continuing to grow, to evolve, to adjust, and it's currently guided by a roadmap, which is the other document which is going to be reviewed and which will be part of this consultation of today. And this roadmap and what we do in terms of our cooperation are obviously two sides of the same coin, and they go hand in hand. We are currently closing a period of cooperation of our budget, which was running from 2014 to 2020, and South Africa was endowed with 278 million euros for that cooperation in that period. During this period, our cooperation was on three main sectors: employment, education, training, and innovation, and building the capable and developmental state. And you have here the logos of a number of projects, programs, which have been implemented with various departments of the government to run the show on these three sectors of our cooperation. And you will certainly recognize some of the logos you have met or partners that you have been interacting. What is the role of civil society in this portfolio? The ambassador has already given you a number of examples, but the main message is really that cooperation with civil society, although it is diverse, very often small projects, not always in the capital and always visible to the eyes of the key decision makers, it is still a sizable part of our cooperation. The model has evolved. even though on the program itself of the cooperation of the multi-annual indicative program, so the core envelope allocated to South Africa, we have around 8% of the resources which have been contracted out to the CSOs. Under which model? Essentially, through linking three aspects of cooperation in our in any program or in any major program. On the one hand, we support the policy of the government through budget support. We provide technical assistance with the aim of providing capacity building to the institutions. And we finance a number of CSO activities, CSO grants, which are doing groundwork on the same topic and which can intervene as well in the policy making, in the policy dialogue, and being a triangular component representing the participation of the society in the relationship we have and the policy dialogue we can have with the government. On top of these resources in the program itself, we have resources from what we call the budget lines of the European Union, the thematic budget lines, the one on human rights, the one on agriculture, gender, a number of topics that these thematic lines were covering in the previous financing perspective. And we have also got resources. So that allowed another 12% of our portfolio, which is coming on CSOs, that makes this 20%. So in total, it is still in the tune of more than 50 million euros, which are today run by civil society. This is very significant amount. We, of course, want to continue that as much as we can. So this new financial instrument, this Neighbourhood Development and International Cooperation Instrument, essentially, if we compare the period 2014 and 2020, the European Union had different rules of engagement with the various regions of the world, and in particular, the least developed countries and the lower middle income countries, and sometimes with upper middle income countries. Different rules of engagement, which we called each of these regions, and they are on the left map at a different instrument. There were 5, depending on whether it was Sub-Saharan Africa, the Neighbourhood, Latin America, Asia, South Africa had a specific one, and Groenland had another one because it's a very specific case, or at least the peripheral territories had a specific case. The idea is to have one single instrument, which is essentially DACable, so at 92%, which allows to uphold and promote the values and the interest of the Union. All countries can receive activities of that program at different levels, of course, depending on the needs. There are, and what is important is that in this instrument, 76%, so 3/4 will be allocated to geographical programs. Programs like the MIP of South Africa, and South Africa will have a program in this forthcoming period. And this program will be financed out of the Sub-Saharan Africa NDICI envelope of 29 billion euros for 7 years. A very strong focus on the geographies, and you can see that the thematic programs which were in the tune of 20–25% in the previous financial period, have been reduced to 8%. That is a substantial. So it's important that we program activities with the CSOs from the national program, as there will be a lesser resource. You saw what I told you before, it was half-half, basically. The 20% of the CSO was half from the national program, half from the thematic envelopes. In the coming period, we'll have to consider much more the role within the programming document. Then you have other envelopes, and that shows you that resources are still predominantly out of the resources of the NDICI, predominantly going to sub-Saharan Africa, 29 billion, of course, out of 50 plus. What are the drivers of these new instruments? Clearly, the 2030 agenda and the 2030 agenda and the SDGs remain core to our cooperation. These are the targets. These are the targets we have decided to reach jointly. And I should recall that the European Union itself is having a report on implementation of the SDGs. So this is really a joint target, something we have together decided, and that we are ready to contribute financially to reach. The Paris Agreement is another very important component of our policy framework. The European Union is fully engaged in the reduction, in the objectives of the Paris Agreement on climate change. We need to finance it. We have made commitments. We'll abide by these commitments. The Addis Ababa Action Agenda is an important part of the 2030 agenda. And in a country like South Africa, where the development agenda is essentially in the hands of the government budget, and the transformation agenda is in the hands of the government budget, what we do is complementary, and we need to bring into South Africa innovative financial mechanisms, blending grants and loans. Solidarity of the grants is perfectly compatible with loans and of development resources. We talk of development loans. We don't talk of commercial operations. On the European Union, the global strategy on foreign and security policy is also important. That is defines important areas like human rights, for instance. These were compounded in the new European Consensus of Development, which was adopted 4 years ago, out of which we can see that eradicating poverty, tackling all inequalities are essential for people's ability to seize the development opportunities. And the EU actions must apply the principles of do not harm and build back better. When we look at South Africa in that context, clearly, as I said, we need to think of a more strategic use of innovative financial instruments and engaging with the private sector. And we are very encompassing the private sector representation in the civil society of this country. It's a wide concept of civil society. Knowledge, expertise to build institutional partnership and exchanges are gaining impetus. We could see it over the last years in the cooperation. This is a trend, and this is probably where we have an added value as European Union. We must capitalize on the numerous CSOs in South Africa because they represent a widely accepted player on the country development agenda. And finally, we have to keep on building and entertaining the scientific, the relationship based on the scientific and university capacities of South Africa, which is somehow in the region a country ahead. So what are the priorities? I mentioned we wanted to uphold our priorities. They were somehow designed in the EU-Africa strategy, which has been discussed with the Africa Union. And you have, that comes on 5, if you distill the content of this political relationship with the Africa Union, you have 5 priority areas which are coming very clear. The Green Deal. The Green Deal is a growth strategy. It's not a conservationist strategy. And it's a growth strategy which has to look at conservation, but which has to look at circular economy, biodiversity in a wide sense, smart cities, sustainable energy. So and water, oceans too coast on South Africa, how can we omit the waters and pollution? Digital, science, technology and innovation. This has several aspects on the e-governance, the connectivity, the skills, the business development, but also the rules of the game and how you protect citizens and you protect data. The third priority is the alliance for establishing alliances for sustainable growth and development. This includes 3 pillars. First of all, it's to prepare the youth for the jobs. It's the higher education, it's the technical vocational education and training. It's making sure that there are investments from the country, not foreign direct investments, but that the investments in the country are picking up and that the savings existing are investing in good investments for the future, for the sustainability of the country. Of course, this requires that the rules of the game on investments are proper. It's the decent jobs agenda. It's the definition of what is a sustainable investment, and is this definition national, regional, continental, worldwide? And it's finally the trade, the connectivity of the country, which will generate this growth, or at least entertain and participate to this growth. The fourth priority, globally for the continent or worldwide, are the migration partnerships. And the migration partnerships is really now, with the experience of the last 10 years, building on the root causes of irregular migration, forced displacement, which is where we have to act. It's the management of the migration itself, and it is the legal pathways for durable solutions. Finally, the fifth priority on governance, peace and security, human development remains at the core because of this is one of the core values of the European Union. And we believe in the stability of regions, of countries, based on the respect of and the promotion of these aspects. Fundamental values, rule of law, accountability, but as well conflict prevention, resilience to crisis, and actions against terrorism, organized crimes, which we see are upcoming issues, and where already we have programs, projects in the region involving South Africa. So a complex agenda, and the question is for us in this programming exercise, how we are going to take those priorities and somehow match them with the priorities of the country of South Africa and define where we can best intervene in mutual interest. Targets have been defined for this instrument by our budgetary authority, the Parliament of the European Union. 92% of this instrument has to be DACable. And there is a provision for 8% non-DACable for interventions, which could be for mutual interest in the with other developed economies or in areas which are not fitting this development, the development objectives of DAC. And the focus will be on fragile and LDC, but all countries, and I say it again, South Africa will have an indicative program in the coming years. 85% of the actions have to target gender equality and women empowerment. And there are some spending targets, 25% on climate change. This is very challenging. 10% on migration, and 20% on social inclusion and human development. So the programming exercise, we are there. As I said, this will be resources starting from 2021, from the budget of the European Union. We need to find 3 priority sectors and design already the first allocation of resources from the year. So in this very first period of the year, we are preparing what could be the program. And this is in this frame that we are doing a set of consultations with, of course, the government, the civil society, the other development partners, and including the UN, but also some of the member states of the European Union, of course, and discuss how we can have a better cooperation as a Team Europe, bringing our various resources together into pursuing some key objectives and some key features. So I will stop there and just invite you through the chat to tell us a little bit where you believe in that context that I have defined. Yes, I have a very nice slide here, which is very complicated. And maybe I give you the floor chat to explain how we should focus. Type keyword. Is it the result?
So Bernard, let me just. Okay.
Go ahead.
So we again inviting you to go to the link menti.com to type the code that is provided in the chat, and that you give us keywords in terms of sector you think the EU should focus in the next 7 years. So we're going to give you a minute or 2 to be able to do so. And then the screen will be changing as you are typing. So please go to. Thank you very much. I can see people are already active. So please go to menti.com and type the word in menti.com, not in the chat. We're going to have an extra minute to do so. We can see that there's a strong focus on education and youth development, social protection, accountability. But let's see if this changes within the next minute. So please go to menti.com, enter the code, and then type keywords of sector you think the EU should invest in the next 7 years. Okay, so thank you very much for this. You can still go and type some of the sectors, but if not, we're going to move on with the presentation. It was to give us a little bit of a sense of where do you think we should focus. So I can see a really strong youth development, accountability, education, and then there's different sections within education that are coming through early learning, gender-based violence, agriculture, climate, circular economy, corruption, social protection. There's a lot of suggestions that you make here. And thank you very much for this. We're taking that into consideration, give us a little bit of your view. And now, Bernard, I think you will be able to go ahead with the presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I must say I was looking at how this slide is moving and how it is showing keywords. It's really a wonderful and participatory way. And thank you for the organizers and the consultants who are assisting us into that. I just want to reassure the participants to the webinar that we are going to use this information. We are definitely going to look at it very closely, to understand and to see all the good ideas to the chat and all the comments which are made. That will be analyzed, assessed, and back. Let me go back to my screen.
Bernard,
Yes.
you'll need to click on display settings again for me, please.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Now, as I said, what you just presented is very important because it allows us to look at the keywords and to assist us in our thinking. As I mentioned, the challenge for us is to make this cross-reading of the development priorities of South Africa and our priorities of intervention, so that overall, as EU, we have a sizable impact on the way the world is moving and some of the SDGs. And of course, here you have the SDGs which are represented. As I said, they are core reference points. If we take three major policy documents of the government: the National Development Plan, the National Determined Contribution, and the South Africa. Yes.
Sorry, Bernard, you need to go on display setting. We cannot see your screen.
Ah, okay.
Display setting.
You can see it now.
Swap presenter.
It's surprising. Swap, yes. This is what I had. Is it okay now?
Chad, is it okay?
I'm still getting the presenter view. Please just click on that for me. It should
Because it says my screen sharing is paused. Resume
please.
share. Yes. And now?
Please just stop screen sharing for me, and then we'll share it again.
Okay. I'll share again. Sorry to all the viewers to that.
Chad, where do we go from now?
You would just go on to present. The presenter
sorry.
option is right next to the.
Yeah. So I go into the slideshow. Is it okay now? I need to change the display, the swap the presenter's view, or is it okay?
You swap that, please. There we go. Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you, Bernard.
Okay. Well, sorry for everybody to this. I just need to put that somewhere. All right. So as I said, the challenge is really to make this cross analysis. And we take three fundamental documents of the government policy. The National Development Plan, the National Determined Contribution to the Paris Agreement, and the Economic Recovery Plan of South Africa post-COVID. On some of the catchwords, some of the keywords we can take there, on the NDP, inequality linked to unemployment, and active citizenships are clearly fitting very well with some of our priorities. On the Paris Agreement, mitigation and adaptation are both present, and they are certainly both to be considered in the country development agenda. On the recovery plan, we see their digital economy, skills development, resource mobilization and fight against corruption, because this is something which has very clearly come to be an important part of the policy making, and regional integration. So what are some of the features that we see coming through this joint analysis and which are really inspiring us into the design of the next programming? An accountable governance and citizen participation at all levels is an important enabling factor for addressing inequality. And inequality is a strong driver today that we see could be a base of our intervention. And inequalities will be reduced through the preparation and the training of youth to the jobs of the future. The jobs of the future are the digital ones, the climate related, the transition, the circular economy. Linked to it, the SMME development in green economy will be essential to achieve the NDICI targets. SMME development
Bernard, I think we've lost you.
He seems to have dropped off the call.
Okay, so let me probably jump in while we're trying to, and Chad, maybe may I ask you while we're trying to get Bernard back on. So do you think so? So Bernard wanted to present some of our thinking around the priority from the South African development, the various documents that he mentioned, as well as the European Commission priorities. And we wanted to ask you in the chat to give us your view on our analysis in terms of some of the priorities, as well as what will be the strengths of civil society in these specific sectors. So I'm just giving you a head ups on some of the questions that we're going to ask you to answer, discuss in the chat. But to be able to go back to the presentation, may I ask Chad, if possible, to give us the 2-minute movie now. So we do a break just to come back to the presentation. Is that okay? Sorry for this. So thank you. Bernard is trying to reconnect. So let me take from here some of the presentation while Bernard is trying to reconnect. We're really sorry for this difficulty with our own internet connection. So Bernard was mentioning that some of the thinking, which are a capable and accountable, transparent, and efficient governance at all levels, is important for enabling factor for addressing inequalities. Inequalities will be reduced by preparing and training youth for the job of the future. SMME development in the green economy will be essential to achieve the NDICI targets. The digitalization can create inclusion, efficiency, transparency, and contribute to a better access to services for all citizens. Building the EU and South Africa partnership at regional and continental level can help to recover from the COVID-19 pandemic, build back better, and achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. So this is some of the thinking that we have, linking South Africa priorities and the Commission priorities. So as I was mentioning, and I think you've seen these priorities explained in the movie. So we want to get your view if you think that in this sector that you've mentioned, the EU can have an added value, and what are the role and the strengths of civil society in this sector. But Bernard is coming perhaps to finalize this.
Thank you. Yes, I apologize to everybody. We are all at the mercy of these programs. Now, if I just complete on what I was saying before, clearly it's the role of digitalization in this country, whether it can contribute to service delivery, to better services, to better life for South Africans, and how could we intervene? And then it is the value of our relationship and our peer-to-peer relationship. A peer-to-peer relationship very active in the field of science, university, culture, where together we are making the policy environment evolving in South Africa and with South Africa. And this is very key for us, and we believe this is a stronghold for the future program. So this is where we think that the EU could add some value, and somehow this is where we are interested to know from you whether we are going into the right direction, whether we miss some important points, and therefore, thereafter, what are the strengths of the civil society in those sectors? Is civil society strong? Would it need to be strengthened? Would it need to be accompanied in order to contribute in those areas to the development of South Africa? So if you could type I see many reactions already on the chat. This is very encouraging. We really invite you to keep on going to that, and we'll prepare some of the reactions as we work. Yeah, thank you. You take back.
So thank you very much. So please provide your feedback in the chat, mentioning all panelists and attendees. So now I would like to invite our head of sector of social sector and governance, our team leader, Mr. Thomas Tiedemann, to present the second topic we wanted to discuss with you that some of you know about, which is a roadmap of engagement with civil society. Thomas, the floor is to you.
Yes, good morning. Thank you, Aurélie. Good morning, everyone. Really happy to see such a huge turnout. As the ambassador has already said, we have 226 participants. That's just wonderful. Thank you all for making time. As we said earlier, we are launching consultations with civil society basically for two processes that will result in two documents. One is our programming for the next 7 years, and that is what our head of cooperation, Dr. Bernard Rey, presented. On the other process is the review of the roadmap for the European Union's engagement with civil society. And that is something that Aurélie and I will briefly present this morning. I will try to share my screen. I do hope that you can see me and hear me. So, the EU roadmap for engagement with civil society, what is it? Let's start with the definition, which you will see here, and you will see this is it's quite a long definition. It takes the entire slide. This is the EU's definition of civil society. You will see that it really is very broad. It encompasses everything from very grassroots organization at community level, so CBOs, all the way to internationally active INGOs. We have a specific focus here, a specific mentioning of women's organizations, of youth organizations, which is of course important in a country like South Africa in terms of the demographic profile. We have a specific reference to indigenous communities, to cultural organizations. You also see the faith-based organizations, foundations, think tanks, then trade unions and cooperatives. So how workers and producers are organized. Media is mentioned, and you even see professional and business associations. So civil society for us really is everything that is non-state and not for profit. So individual for-profit operators, private sector organizations are excluded, but their associations, as you can see here, the professional and business associations are included in our definition of civil society. You see very clearly that we value the diversity and the broad range, not only sectorally, but also when it comes to the size and the scope, and maybe also the ambition of organizations working all the way from the very local to the very international level. We realized very much that civil society is not one homogeneous construct, and that we often deal with organizations whose interests are actually competing in civil society. So we are keenly aware of the fact that we are dealing with a very heterogeneous set of organizations. Not only those that are formally established, but also civic movements, for example. We believe strongly in civil society's key role as an independent actor in foreign affairs, in international cooperation and development. And I don't think we're bragging too much if we're saying that the EU has sort of become a lead development partner for local civil society in the past. Let me say a few words on the policy framework. Where does this all come from? And you will see in our documents a lot of reference to the 2012 communication of the European Commission, which is entitled "The Roots of Democracy and Sustainable Development, Europe's Engagement with Civil Society in External Relations." So you see already the appreciation that we have for civil society in the very title of this communication, looking at civil society as the roots of democracy, something our ambassador also referred to. Our appreciation for civil society and the acknowledgement that civil society is such an important construct, and not a single actor, of course, is not anything new. We have been dealing very extensively and comprehensively with civil society for decades. But we wanted to share with you this quote from the mission letter of the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, who started as the president of we still call it the new commission. They have been in place since December 2019. So this is an extract. Basically, it's sort of the assignment given to our Commissioner for International Partnerships, Jutta Urpilainen, if you want part of the terms of reference for our Commissioner. It says here, as you can see, I want you to have a dedicated focus on supporting civil society around the world. Civil society is seen as the experts on the ground that often lead the way on sustainable development. And here comes what we are trying to live up to, this ambition, and what we're trying to operationalize as well. We should ensure civil society has a far greater role in designing and implementing European policies, programs, and projects. So this is something we are trying to live up to also in our daily work here at the EU delegation to South Africa, and very much with the process that we're launching today, which is to consult you on the revised roadmap for our own engagement with civil society in South Africa. Let me just mention very briefly the 3 priorities of this communication, the roots of democracy. So what did we see in 2012, and do we still see as the priorities in our engagement with civil society? The first one is to enhance efforts to promote a conducive environment for civil society in partner countries. This is, of course, important everywhere, maybe not as urgent in South Africa as in other countries. For example, I have previously worked in Uganda. You may have seen the news on the recent elections. I've worked in Eritrea and Ethiopia, all places where the civic space, so the operating environment for civil society is very much limited. It is clearly a different environment and much more conducive in South Africa, but it reminds us that there's also still steps that could be taken to make it even more conducive. I think, for example, of some individual human rights defenders that actually also still have a very, very tough space to operate in South Africa. The second priority is to promote a structured and meaningful participation of civil society in domestic policy making in the EU program cycle, precisely what we are consulting you on today, our programming, and in international processes and debates. For me, it's very important that this is mentioned as the second priority. It's not, as you can see, the focus immediately on implementation and on service delivery, where civil society has for many decades traditionally had a role of sort of a gap filler where government could not reach. But the focus is here really on the participation in policy making, in policy dialogue. And this is also, if you remember what our ambassador said in her opening remarks, something that we try to integrate in all of our programs. The third priority is then to increase the capacity of local civil society organizations to perform their roles independently and effectively. And this is, again, of course, a bit of an assignment to ourselves, I would say, to explore how we can help develop that capacity. We will be referring later on to a survey that we would greatly appreciate your contributions to learn a little bit more about civil society in South Africa, about your own organizations, where you are asked as well to make a bit of an assessment of your own capacity in different areas of your work, and even suggest ways for us to possibly help build that capacity. What is the roadmap? Just a snapshot very briefly. It's both an output and it's a process. So at the end of the consultation and drafting process, we will have a document that is hopefully very solid and is based on extensive analysis and consultations. But for me, the value is also at least as much in the process, how we arrive at the document. So the document is not overly lengthy. It's based first on an analysis. What do we know about civil society? And we have an existing roadmap. So we went through this exercise a few years ago, but now is the time to update that roadmap. And we have been asked to very much link the process of updating this roadmap with our new programming process, which obviously makes sense because we need to assess how much we can work with civil society and how much you can help us in our programming and in our implementation of what we are trying to do in the next 7 years. So it starts with an analysis. It starts with a bit of a reality check. How have we been engaging with civil society in the past years? Where do we want to go? What are the priorities? Then actions. How do we get there? Some actions could be more studies if we identify areas that where we don't know enough about civil society because of new topics that have come up or new ways that civil society is engaging with other spheres of society. And then we document that and we try to keep track of our engagement so that we see over the period of the maybe 3-4 years that the roadmap is valid. Are we on track? Are we doing what we have set out to do? Are we living up to the commitments that we have made? Importantly, this is a roadmap that is not unique to the EU delegation. It's a shared roadmap that all our member states that are present in South Africa also subscribe to and contribute to the process. That means in the consultations, we have a lot of internal consultations, of course, with our team at the EU delegation. And primarily, of course, and this is why I'm so happy that so many of you could make time for this consultation this morning. Primarily, we consult with local civil society. But we also talk a lot to the colleagues at the embassies and missions of the EU member states in South Africa, because in the end, the document will be owned by all missions, will actually be approved by the ambassadors, the heads of missions. This is very briefly, because we are running late and we would like enough time for sort of the question and answer. This is very briefly what the roadmap is. And now I would like to hand the floor to Aurélie to go a little bit more into detail about the previous roadmap, maybe give some pointers there, what that roadmap encompassed and how we will go about the process of arriving at a new roadmap. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Thomas. So some of you, I hope, have seen that document. I've discussed, or many of you have been in consultation a few years ago. It was a long time ago when we've developed the first roadmap for our engagement with civil society in South Africa. And it wasn't an easy process, and I know we had a lot of disagreements with some of our organization in the sector. But so as mentioned, there was a little bit of analysis of the situation, and I think we really acknowledge the role that civil society plays in South Africa, a really active role in social justice, raising awareness, education, campaigning for human rights, and many of you are coming, I've seen the chat, from the social justice and the human rights sector. The role also of civil society in improving service delivery, complementing government social services program. But we've seen also, so what I'm saying was our analysis in 2014, 2015. At the time, there was also a sense of crisis in the sector, especially around the financial sustainability, the capacity, the ability to do advocacy work, the impact of civil society on inequality and poverty, the issue of accountability towards citizens, and how do they collaborate with government and private sector. So in this context, we've developed a roadmap. So our roadmap at the time had 4 priorities, and I acknowledge that these priorities were really ambitious. So the first one, and I'm going to give you the priority and give you example of things that we did linked to this priority. So the first one was a transparent, communicative, and sustainable, vibrant civil society. So it was really around capacity building, and for that we had a capacity building facility for all of our grantees, not around log frame or financial management, but around diverse things. It was around human resource management, around how to better communicate, how can you improve the way of doing advocacy. And this was also done by many of the member states who still have funding for civil society. I know that they've also provided capacity building. So I know that the French embassy have provided capacity building for the organization. I know that if some of you are financed by Finland, also Finland have tried to set up better cooperation and exchange between their grantees, and that was a way to answer to that priority. After we had the second priority was around the civil society contribute effectively to building a capable and accountable state. And there I can mention, for example, the work we've been doing with civil society and legislature, the work we've been doing on budget monitoring with organization as part of our PFM program, and also the work we've been doing with some civil society and local authorities. Then we have civil society positively contribute to economic policy making and help promoting inclusive growth. I think that one was a bit perhaps more difficult, but still we've really tried to include civil society in some of the trade discussion, for example, as well as nationally and also at regional level. And then the last one was civil society can express voice and influence key policy process underpinning the EU and South Africa's strategic partnership. And there again, it was how do we include civil society in our policy dialogue and dialogue facility. So I can mention, for example, at the moment, the policy exchange and policy dialogue on transgender and intersex between European organization, South African organization, and South African government, and some European member states government. Similar also on the torture, similar in the field of human rights, where we've tried to encourage South African organizations to network with Europeans and to try to improve that relationship and give opportunity. It was also exchange of different think tanks. So, so that's what we've tried to do. And as I mentioned, I think we haven't been successful everywhere. So we have to do a bit better this time. So Thomas, next slide, please. So as mentioned, Thomas, so we have a new roadmap to do. It's similar in terms of the structure, as Thomas mentioned, this is similar. So yes, we need to look at the state of civil society, having a brief update. And there, I think there's a lot of things to say of what happened over the last 2-3 years with civil society, the really important role of civil society in uncovering corruption and state capture, the rise also of new movement and their ability or not to influence policy change and policy making. I'm thinking, for example, of the total shutdown, which working in the field of gender, I'm quite aware of. But I think there is also a real analysis to do of the role of civil society to respond to COVID. And I really see that in the chat, and what's the role of civil society, grassroots organization, but also of a coalition like C19 currently in terms of influencing the COVID response. Then again, we need to learn also from our previous engagement, what have worked, what didn't work, and what we are able to do with who we are. Looking at our key priorities for the future engagement, as Thomas mentioned and Bernard, these priorities really need to be aligned with the Commission, the 5 Commission priorities, the SDG, and also the Gender Action Plan, which is another policy document which will have other opportunity to present, but more or less is how do we improve our target in terms of gender equality and women empowerment. So in the slide, I mentioned that there's a shift towards structured dialogue with civil society at country level. This has always been an objective of the roadmap, but we think that it's an objective that we need to reinforce in South Africa, is how we ensure that there's a more structured dialogue between the EU and the civil society and or not government. It's obviously in South Africa where you don't have a big national coalition. Engaging with civil society is always sometimes a little bit more tricky, but I think it's something we all need to look at, how we have something a little bit more structured, which is not just ad hoc meeting as we often have. And then of course we'll have to look at the action and activity that we're going to have to be to do. So mainly it's linked to research, to policy and political dialogue, and operational support, meaning of course financing support to civil society, and as mentioned, the MNE. So Thomas, next slide please. So the way forward, and here I want to mention, and this is also Bernard couldn't present his last slide, so I'm going to combine the two. The way forward is that we have an online survey. It's online since 10 o'clock. You can see the link here. I'm going to also add the link in the chat. This survey will be open until the 10th of February. There's question related to the programming and the priorities, as well as to the roadmap. So please take time, because I think it takes a little bit of time, 20 to half an hour to go and provide the feedback in the survey. For the programming, we will have further engagement with organization in specific sector. For the roadmap, we will also going to have further engagement and consultation, but it will be more around March and April once we've done with the programming, and then we can see. The final document for the roadmap is May-June 2021. And as I mentioned, it's also something that needs to be discussed with our member states. So here also I put the contact of the delegation if you want to send any feedback, or if you have any difficulties with the online. So I really want to thank you very much. So we're going to now go to a Q&A session. So I really would like you to ask all of your questions and your comments in the chat. We're going to take a 8-minute break. It's going to be an opportunity to show you one of our projects with civil society, and we will come back and try to answer as much as possible all of your questions. So please, the chat is for you now. Thank you very much.
I couldn't finish school because my parents passed away. And so I have to look for myself some green pastures. That's why I came here. I found a wife, I have some children. Life is going on. In 2002, I put up my check here so that I can start a new life. The house is here, but no service deliveries. The taps are broken. You go and report to the municipality, they are not being fixed. We have to walk a long distance to get some water at the working taps. More than 200 households are being operated by one tap. And sometimes they just cut off the water, maybe for 2 days, 3 days with no water. And you cannot live without water. Electricity is a problem here. Most of the people are using coal. It's not safe because the carbon dioxide is very dangerous. How will our children study during the night without electricity? Toilets, the biggest issue. You must use a bucket system inside your house. What is the use of having a house with no water? What is the use of having a house with no electricity? From 2002, we were trying to speak to the municipality to come and render some services here. But since then till today, nothing has happened.
It's 13 years now for them waiting for basic services, waiting for houses, waiting for electricity, waiting for toilets, waiting for water. The community of KwaZulu, they requested us to assist them to bridge the gap between them and the local municipality. Plan Act promotes civic empowerment with marginalized communities. to hold local municipalities to account for basic service delivery. At the core of the problem of lack of service delivery is how local municipal budgeting works. So what we've done with the community of KwaZulu is to get their local municipal budget and get them to understand it so that they can see what is required and how they can identify their community projects in the local budget. The community then engages with their municipality with facts, as opposed to burning tires and blocking roads and doi-dois.
Before we were so confused, we didn't know how the municipality is operating with its budget. But today, we know exactly what is happening through the budget, and it's through Plan 8.
For example, for the issue of electricity, what we discovered was that the community of KwaZulu does not have an allocation in the capital budget.
Skills, housing, traders, 5.
The community made a budget submission to get electricity, improve the water supply network, and also increase the number of toilets. What we want to do is to monitor the expenditure of the municipality. The communities then have the power to say, this is what you planned for, and this is what you're spending on the project.
I must make sure that before I die, that all the things have been fixed. They've got water, they've got electricity, sanitation, good basic education. They must not live the life I'm living. Not for me and my family alone, for this entire community.
Thank you to all. I am back with you, and luckily I can be listened. Can I have a confirmation by the organizers that the sound is going through?
Yeah, it's clear.
It's clear. Okay, fine, thank you. All right, let me pick up a few points which have come through the chat. And thank you, it's a wonderful participation, and there is a questionnaire, and there will be opportunity to do. Of course, very many questions react or refer to the recovery of the COVID crisis and the situation in the country, the critical role that the civil society has played at the local level in going through the crisis and the recovery. And some people have insisted, some of you have insisted on the rural economy as having the potential to contribute to the crisis through job creation, ecosystem-based solution. So indeed, yes, the European Union looks at the support to the small and medium enterprises and even micro enterprises in order to support this recovery, the rural economy, the job creation. Today, we support with technical assistance in the agriculture. We look at business viability. It's important that our intervention looks at the possibility of recovery of financially constrained micro, small enterprises so that they can contribute to the growth. We support around 100,000 youth startups to promote youth entrepreneurship, and we are also in the artisanry business. There is a Trade South Africa platform to facilitate greater market access opportunities and to look at impediment. So we also support the agriculture, the agro-processing sector to look at this industrialization. So yes, we can see that coming up. We can see that it's not only the urban cities and that there is a prospect in the rural areas. There were a number of questions on the regional dimension. The European Union is known to support regional integration. It's really part of our DNA to look at regional integration, to make things work better. And we have traditionally been supporting regional economic communities on the one hand, but also the continental dimension and the Africa Union. This will continue. This will continue, and clearly the ambition of Africa to have a continental free trade area is laudable, and we shall provide resources at the level of the continent to assist. We shall provide resources in the countries, in the regions. As I mentioned, the priority of the programming, which is really to prepare what we aim at doing in South Africa, what we aim at supporting in South Africa. Then the envelope can be from the national envelope. It can be from the regional. It can be from the continent. But what is important is that it's an envelope which aims at pushing the development agenda in South Africa. And maybe also there were some problems in South Africa because South Africa, not being part of the group of the Africa, Caribbean, and Pacific country, could not benefit from the European Development Fund, and in particular the resources we were providing for the SADC region. Now this will end, and South Africa will be fully beneficial from regional programs, either run by SADC or because we feel that there is an interest to have a multi-country program on a given topic, which could be promoted and with a leader in a region, a country in a region or an institution, not always the SADC Secretariat, which could do that. So that is definitely something we are going to keep on supporting. It's important for us. It's the regional value chains on a number of products. It's not only the trade with Europe, but it's also the intra-African trade, which we believe is key for the development of the continent. And we are their instruments, we have programs, and this is something that where there are opportunities. And in the SADC Economic Partnership Agreement, there is a provision to have a civil society forum discussing on the impact of the SADC Economic Partnership Agreement. There were a number of questions on the human rights defenders. Yes, the instrument for human rights, for democracy of human rights of the European Union continues, and it will be able to provide resources to human rights defenders as it has done over the last 30 years, probably. There are a number of questions on SMMEs. I'm really going through them as we discuss. It's a live session. There were a number of questions on many questions on municipalities, on ethic procurement, on capacity and interaction between the civil society and the municipalities. Also something about the Swaziland as well. Yes, we are very active. We try to promote twinning relationship between European cities and South African cities, not only at the metro level, but in some cases at the metro level, working on ethical public procurement. We have had a work last year with the Ministry of Department of Public Service on ethics in public service. This is about procurement. This is about, we are keen so that there is a sharing of experience with twinning, with exchange of technical experts, and working together on these issues. They are important on all sides of the world. We are currently supporting SMMEs. There are questions on how can we work with the private sector, the SMME, on certain startups which are there. It's good to know that you exist. We do not know you all. Every time we discover the dynamism of the startup and what you provide in South Africa, we are interacting with the Department of Science and Innovation, supporting the National System of Innovation, and we are looking really that this brings the resources and enriches the tissue of activities of the startup in the country. This component on innovation for service delivery focuses on green, on inclusive delivery, and we also support public finance management on the service delivery at local level, at municipal level, to make sure that procurement, that the best use is made of the resources at the municipal level, that they are properly managed, that infrastructures are committed and completed on time, and we want that. We believe that this continues. We believe that there is an opportunity to work at the local level to make sure in a very urbanized country like South Africa that we can fulfill that. There were some questions on the green financing mechanisms, on the green responses. Once again, I want to stress that the Green Deal, it's something that we try to do in Europe as well. The Green Deal is, first of all, an attempt in Europe to the recovery of the COVID-19 crisis. And it's a growth strategy. It's a growth strategy. And as such, green needs to be cross-cutting, and it needs to be there. It has to be the engine. This is where there are opportunities for growth. This is where there are opportunities for new jobs. So by putting 25% of the portfolio on green issues as spending targets, we are clearly saying, let's do that together. Let's partner into this achievement. We want to collaborate more and more with the member states on the green issues. We want to launch an initiative with member states which will really show how together as Team Europe, the European Union, the member states, we are pushing and assisting this agenda through more investments, new investments, through the support to public policy, to knowledge and evidence-based discussion on these issues. We believe this is very important. We know the power of science in South Africa, the trust than the South Africa society has in science, in its university system, in its think tanks. They are important for us, and we share that strong feeling that these are supporters. Important question which was raised. We have been, of course, as I said, we are interacting with the South African constituencies. Today is the civil society. We are clearly engaged with the government on agreeing where the support of the European Union will be provided. It is clearly, this is clearly in the spirit of the partnership between South Africa and the European Union. We are very satisfied with our partnership. We believe it gives great success. We have a full trust into the capacity of the administration, into the capacity of Treasury to make the best possible use of the resources we channel through the government system. There is overall a solid public finance management mechanism in South Africa. The ratings are there. We believe that there is a scope for looking at public expenditure. Can we improve public expenditure? But clearly we are interacting with the key decision makers. Now, the government today is heavily involved in the preparation of the budget. It's a difficult budget that the government is preparing. So we have been somehow swapping the order of consultation. We are consulting with you, and we plan some consultations with the government in the coming weeks to be able to design and to see, to take up their ideas. We know a number of the ideas because the consultation has started with the government. But they have started on some sectors. Last November, we had a dialogue on macroeconomic issues with a number of entities of the government, SARS, SARB, Treasury, and this macroeconomic dialogue was very much geared at saying, okay, in macroeconomic terms, what does the support of the European Union mean, and what are some of the criteria where it could strengthen the public policy of South Africa. Similarly, we had early December a forum, a high-level forum on environment, climate change, water, which was opened by Minister Creasy, the European Vice President, the Vice President of the European Commission, Commissioner Timmermans, and was followed by high-level discussions on some of the challenges. And these debates are informing the programming. And we have been listening to the department when they say disaster risk reduction for us, adaptation policy is a key point, a key area where we believe we could support from partnering with the European Union. We have been listening to the departments when they say that on the renewables, it's also the issue of energy efficiency. It's the issue of changing some of the small business attitude towards the various energy compact or compound and the strategy. So we have had discussions, and we are not starting from scratch to say that we are designing like if nothing had been done. We have the lessons from the previous programs, what has been working, and we had the discussion, for instance, with the National School of Government, where we discussed digitalization in training of the public servants, digitalization in the regional role of South Africa, capacity to train the leaders of public administration on the continent. So we have, if you want, it has been a continuous process over the last months. We have had a number of sectorial debates and or with entities which are very active in our cooperation. We consult you today, and the list of challenges that I put, which are priorities, they are not cast in stone at this stage. They are really where we think at this stage that the priorities of the South Africa development lie, crossing with areas where we feel that the European Union has a comparative advantage, an added value, and that we can then match those and say, look, these are areas where we could interact. Certainly something like the role of South Africa in the region is an area where we could interact. I have not listed everything. I've listed some ideas which are there, and we still need to sit with the government and discuss where we could then design new programs in the future. Thomas, you have a point.
Yes, thank you very much, Bernard. Lots of questions, very rich contributions in the chat. Thank you to all participants. That is really very valuable for us. Let me try and just briefly try to respond to some of the questions on civil society. These are not in any order of importance, of course, just as they came in, and I've tried to sort of make a cluster of a couple of questions. It's impossible to respond, obviously, to all the questions, hence all the more important that you participate in our survey. And also one colleague asked how we facilitate longer submissions than permissible in the chat. So I think we have displayed the email address where you can send your contributions if they are even longer than what is permissible in the survey. And I can ask my colleagues here to maybe display that email address again in the chat while I speak. So one input is civil society is often restricted by government inefficiencies and bureaucracies and frankly corrupt practices, and gets little to no support from the private sector, which has an awful track record of reinvesting in the country. This seems to be overlooked, and a strong emphasis on government and private sector seems to prevail. I think in response to that contribution, we really need all the sectors. We need a strong and capable government. We are working in countries where we don't have that. We're working in Somalia, where the government doesn't reach larger parts of the country. We're working in South Sudan, where government capacity is still very weak, and it is very difficult. So I firmly believe we need a strong government, and hence also our work on supporting the capacity of the government and the public administration. We also need a strong private sector, an innovative and energetic private sector, because that is where most of the jobs are created. We cannot look to government to create jobs. Private sector, especially small, medium and micro enterprises, are where jobs are created, including in South Africa. Hence, our work with the private sector to support the conducive environment for that to happen and support value chains and so on. But as we said, we strongly believe also in the value of civil society as that third sphere, hence our engagement for decades really, and our renewed focus on working with civil society. But I believe we need all three. A cluster of questions on how sort of logistically or in terms of our funding arrangements, we engage with civil society. Many grassroots organizations, CBOs, don't know how to apply, and when the calls are out, another colleague saying, we need to give enough time when we launch a call for proposals for organizations to apply. Difficult for even long-standing NGOs to access funding. And another voice saying the application process to the EU is very bureaucratic and can be very exclusive to established civil society organizations. Is their way of simplifying the application process. So all our calls are public. It is only in very, very limited circumstances that we are allowed as an organization to process what we call a direct award. So we go directly to an organization to ask for a collaboration, ask for a proposal, and then eventually possibly sign a contract. This is, for example, in humanitarian emergencies and so on. Otherwise, the calls are always public. You are invited to check on our delegation website. We also publish the calls in the local newspapers. Of course, we invite you to join us on our Twitter accounts, EUNSA, and then you will know about these calls. We really aim for quite wide publication. There is always a minimum response time. We normally ask for concept notes first, and then longer proposals, including budgets and logical frameworks for those proposals that are shortlisted. And the minimum response time is normally 45 days for the concept notes, and then another 45 days for the full proposals, which should, I think, generally be sufficient to put an application together. Now, on the aspect of the bureaucracy, there's no sugarcoating it. Yes, our procedures are very bureaucratic, and please believe me, it is not only you sort of as our partners suffering from that, but it's also us that work within the institutions that we suffer a little bit from the bureaucracy. We are, of course, the EU is a big democracy, democracy as well, but also bureaucracy. So our procedures are difficult. We admit that. We have tried to simplify. It's not always possible to easily do that. We recognize it's a problem for smaller organizations to apply for EU funding. Sometimes that is also due to the fact that we need to balance a little bit support to smaller organizations, which are then often smaller grants, with the transaction costs on our side. So it involves a lot of staff time on our side to administer any contract, any grant. So it doesn't really let's say present a good ratio if the grant funding for an individual project is too small. So what we try to do is we encourage consortia between larger organizations and smaller organizations. We try to encourage sort of re-granting, where we award a larger grant to a larger organization that then sort of provides smaller grants to smaller organizations, for example. Another question, and there's a need for long-term funding to support finance mechanisms for CSOs into a more sustainable model to rely less on grant funding. That is very true, and we have, it's not a new analysis. Admittedly, that's quite difficult to do. I want to share with you that even in very mature economies, even in the most mature economies of the EU member states, the so-called non-governmental organizations often receive quite a substantial proportion of their funding through government. So they engage in activities that society and also the administration sees as very valuable, and hence that is financially often supported by government funding, despite the fact that, of course, these are civil society organizations, non-governmental organizations. So it's a tall order to come up with financing models that are less reliant on support from development partners. But we are quite cognizant of that of that issue, and we have tried with supported capacity development to sort of encourage social entrepreneurship, to encourage partnerships, and also with private sector to work on that. We have received, of course, a lot of suggestions for individual areas, sectors to work in. I can't respond to each and every one of them. On the gender aspect that has come out quite clearly, we try, as also our head of cooperation, Dr. Ray said, we try to mainstream that we will in the future have to make sure that 85% of our projects are gender sensitive. So we don't have sort of an individual funding or box for gender related projects, but every project needs to really be gender sensitive. One interesting question, and that was the last one, so that I can still pass the ball back to our head of cooperation. A critical perspective, what has been presented so far, suggests business as usual paradigm. It strikes me as being inadequate and misdirected. Many of the CSOs are confronting the enormity of the social crisis sweeping South Africa. We need to understand the systemic roots of the crisis. I couldn't agree more. Please trust us that we are not looking for business as usual. We are constantly trying to update and improve our ways of working in our programs, and our outreach to you and the consultation is part of that, and it will be supported by more research, more studies, analysis to make sure our programs are relevant. Let me stop there. Apologies again for not having been able to answer all the questions, but this is only the start of the conversation. Over to you, Bernard.
Yes, thank you very much, Thomas. I'm certain our listeners and participants will appreciate our efforts to react as quickly as possible to the questions. Now, 3 points I want to raise before I give for the close to Aurélie. First of all, as you mentioned, this is a 7 years program that we are preparing. What are we going to do in the coming 7 years? So COVID is there, but it's not only COVID. We need to look beyond. And there is always, when we discuss with civil society, an issue of granularity. We know how much work are root-based organizations doing, but we always try to figure out the best balance between being able to manage a contract on the one hand, making worse, and its minimum size. So there is a balance, and this is very honestly an issue that we are always going through, because we know the burden of getting an EU grant is sometimes disproportionate to the amount that people can receive. So that's something we keep in mind. Several questions on food and agriculture, because there was a rural economy, but of course, several are saying, what are you doing on the food and agriculture? Or can you do more? We are going to launch with the FAO, organizing this quarter, a diagnostic on the agri-food system in South Africa and what the EU role could be. So maybe we shall contact some of you in that frame. This is a methodology very much looking at agri-food system and the SDG agenda beyond SDG 2 on the other dimensions, and to see where there are some areas. Already we are active, but we are active through trade of agricultural products, some of the SPS, sanitary and phytosanitary requirements, strengthening the capacity of the country on the SPS field. Also a very interesting, very fruitful dialogue organized on food waste with the Consumers Association, the Department of Trade, some of the NGOs of environment, to look at the prospects of South Africa to reduce food loss, essential contribution to the SDG on climate, to the food as well, to improve nutrition in the country. SMME, we are discussing on agriculture with our financing instrument, AgriFi, what we could do on agriculture and blending, guaranteeing investments on agriculture, so that we do. Finally, the vaccines, COVID vaccines. COVID affects us all, there is no doubt. And it doesn't stop at border. And the response promoted by the European Union has been a global response over the last 12 months, consistently a global response. Yes, we have been leader to stimulate, and there has been many interactions with the South African government, the South African Department of Science and Innovation, Minister Zimande, on several opportunities, interacting with the commissioners for science in Europe, Commissioner Gabriel. We have been leading the fact that there should be, on the vaccine development, on the test, on the treatment, a huge worldwide commitment of 16 billion euros to do this research and do this innovative process. This is bearing fruit, and we are very happy that this is bear fruit. We have helped, as European Union, with member states, set up the COVAX initiative and defines the rules of the game so that the least developed countries, the poorest countries, would not be left aside the benefits of vaccines. The EU and member states, we contribute 37% of the COVAX advanced market mechanism. More is yet to come. And this is something which we are there. We have been interacting with South Africa, where we have put additional money, resources in the scientific capacity of South Africa on the vaccines, interacting COVAX for less developed countries, and more is to come. There is a whole debate in Europe on how can we bring more into COVAX, how can we expand the number of beneficiary countries. This, we are very trustful on Gavi. We are trustful on the capacity of South Africa to organize a vaccination program. This is where maybe there could be some ad hoc support as well, and we are ready to that. So COVID, yes, an important marker. In the short term, we try to do. In the medium term, on the vaccination, in the medium term, we try to assist in the recovery, build back better. And on the longer term, this is the programming of our assistance. I will stop there and thank you all for your participation. It has been a very rich morning and really grateful and thankful. Goodbye.
Thank you very much, Bernard. So I also would like to thank all of you for attending. We were about 230 participants. It's really nice that the nice thing of doing things online, we can have more people, but the disadvantage is that we cannot really interact and give you the flow besides through the chat. This is why we're going to organize smaller consultation with some civil society organization involved in sectors where we would like to get a better understanding and to better understand what's happening. We will be contacting you. You can also contact us using the email address I've put on the chat, Delegation South Africa CSO. In the meantime, I really invite you to go to the survey. There is no more password. You should be able to answer. This is the best way for us to get a lot of feedback and a good assessment of what's happening. Please share the link to the survey to all of your partners, community-based organizations, even international organizations you know that have activities in South Africa. The more we have, the better view we will get. And on this, I also want to tell you that we're going to share the presentation to all of you using the email address you used when you register for this seminar. If this is not the good email, so you will have to check your email address. If not, please send us an email to the functional mailbox I've sent. And on this, so I really thank you. Looking forward for further engagement for the programming until the end of February, and after, looking forward for engagement for the roadmap in March and April. Thank you very much to all of you.